Hello, my name is Rebekah Windschitl, and I'm a mental health therapist with Youth Service Bureau, which is a nonprofit organization located in Washington County. And today I'm doing a presentation, a podcast for you on the changes, managing the changes of school setting during this COVID time. So first thing is it over yet? We know, first thing we know, we're all sick of this. We're all ready for COVID to be done and over with. But we also know in reality that we don't know when things are going to get back to what we would call normal. As a parent, you're struggling with your own experience in the pandemic while you're trying to help your children get through it as well. And it isn't easy, but there are a few things that you might want to keep in mind that can help out a little bit. So first thing is talking about adapting. So adaptation is hard for kids, okay? So even though we've been dealing with this COVID situation for almost a year, there's still a lot of changing happening. So schools are going from online to soon, and if not already in person, but then they might go back again if the numbers go up. You might think that your child should be able to manage this change pretty easily because, they've been doing changes for a while. You might think, they should have this by now. But something that's helpful to keep is that the adaptation is hard for kids because their brains are still developing, okay? So it can be easier for some and harder for others, but their brain is still developing. And so that makes the adaptations to things a little bit more difficult. To help gain a little bit of a perspective when we talk about adapting, what are these kids adapting to? When they go from one school setting situation to another, there's a lot of change that does happen. So things that do change, their sleep patterns, okay? So I know a lot of times when it comes to in-person school, it's go to bed early, wake up early. But once we went to this distance learning thing, it was, we can go to bed later because we're gonna wake up later. So our sleeping pattern changes. The time of doing schoolwork versus the free time you get. Depending how your school districts has set up your distance learning, sometimes kids are able to just log in, get all their work done, and have the rest of the day to have free. Versus when you're in regular school, you don't get to do that. Or maybe right now the school day is shortened, but when you go back in school, will it still be shortened? We don't know. There's also social pressures of being in person, in class learning. There's a lot of social situations that the kids have to deal with that when they're at home, they don't have to deal with that in the same way. Maybe the format of class structure, the way classes are being taught. And always the new and always changing expectations for work completion, Zoom calls, when these due dates are, all this kind of stuff. So all of these are the things that are changing when the school model changes. And so when we're talking about having to adapt, imagine all of these things changing for you as a parent if this was your job. That's a lot of change that has to happen. So that can be very difficult for quite a few kids. And so excuse me, it might be not surprising that kids might start to push back. They might push against it in some kind of ways. Maybe they act out, or maybe they show some big emotions. So in managing these behaviors from our kids and to work on helping keep perspective of what's changing, it's working on being able to have some of that empathy for that situation. So there's some things that you can do to help keep your kids keep them going and help them adapt to some of these changes. And some of these are going to sound familiar from when we started at the beginning of this pandemic, but they apply just as much now as they did at the beginning of this. And one of those is routine. Trying to keep a similar routine, whether or not the kid is in online learning or in-person learning. Okay, we talked about what's the big thing that changes, the sleep schedule. Keeping the sleep schedule is the same. Yes, it's going to bed early, it's waking up early. And not bringing it back to, let's let you stay up until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning because you don't got to get up until 9. Because the school models are changing back and forth, it's going to be a lot harder to change your sleep schedule every time the school model changes. So keeping the sleep schedule the same is going to make it a lot easier. Having that routine of getting up and getting dressed, not staying in our PJs all day. That also helps get your mind more sharp, being like, okay, I'm out of my PJs. I'm not in sleep mode anymore. I'm more in school mode. It also helps to not do your schoolwork in bed. This can help with focus as well as sleep, is not doing your schoolwork in bed. Find another place that you can do it. Again, creating a schedule. This does go along with routine. Creating a schedule of when I'm going to be doing my work versus when I'm going to be doing my break time. When you're distance learning, sometimes you have more control over this than if you have in-person learning. But you want to work on being able to keep things as consistent as you can. So that way, if the school model changes, it makes it a little easier for them to adapt. You would also expect an increased need for support. Kids are really vulnerable when it comes to change and transitions, and they often search for their secure person to help them through the situation to make sure things are going to be okay. So even if they're asking for more help, more support, you can kind of expect that as they're going through this adaptation, that change. And even expecting some possible behavioral or emotional changes. Kids may express their stress by acting out. And even though they might be really excited to get back to school, there's still a lot of change that's happening. So that excitement for school could also be a little bit of anxiety. And so working on being able to be patient and remember why the kids might be struggling the way that they are, all the stuff that has to change when they're going from one school model to another, to have that perspective, to show that empathy, and work on helping them regulate some of the emotions that they might be having. And being open and honest to having open conversations on how they feel. Giving them space to express the stress that they're feeling, helping them find the words for how they feel. And metaphors are really great for this. Coming up with a metaphor of what this experience is like and how it feels. So other ways that you can help guide your kids during this time is providing validation. What is validation? It's seeing the situation from another person's perspective, and it's acknowledging the emotions that they are experiencing. It's verbally saying, this is the emotion that I see you feeling. Is this correct? And by giving that validation, kids feel heard, they feel the connection with you. And that's a really good feeling to be able to have. And that also helps build trust. So what is validation not? Accepting what is happening is okay. You can validate without approval. So they might be acting up, acting out, being all upset. You can provide validation for what they're feeling by saying, I know this is really hard for you right now because now we got to go back to our old sleep schedule and this is a struggle. And I see how sad or how angry you are at it. You can say that while not approving of the behavior that the kid is doing. So you can validate the emotions without accepting the behavior that's going on. Other ways of showing validation is active listening. And what that is that's listening without trying to speak your piece at the same time. So when we're really active listening, we are hearing on our end everything that the kid is saying and not thinking about everything that we want to say once they're done talking. But doing this active listening and summarizing is we hear everything that they're saying and then we summarize back to them what we heard them say. That shows validation as well. Verbally acknowledging the emotional experience they're having at the time. And one thing that can be often hard for parents when it comes to this is a lot of parents want to provide feedback, tell their kid, this is what they think they should do, or this is how it makes them feel, or when I was a kid, this is how I handled it. What can be helpful for kids is to offer the option for feedback and not just giving it. Because it happens so often that I have kids say, I just want my parent to hear me. I don't want to know what they're thinking. I don't want any advice from them. I just want my parent to listen to me. And so by offering the feedback, but if they say no, not providing that feedback and respecting that can go a long way with kids as well. Another one that's really hard for parents is when parents see their kids struggling, a lot of times they want to solve the problem. And it's not always the right time to solve the problem. Not all problems can or should be solved by the parent, and not all problems need to be solved with the parent's involvement. And so I know parents like to fix things, but maybe that's something that the child needs to do at that time. So it's not always stepping in and solving the problem for the kid, it's kind of having that conversation. So when we're in that time of adaptation, when that time of all these things are changing, it really can be helpful to focus on what we do or do not have control over. So what do we have control over? Ourselves. your actions, your thoughts, your decisions. You can control those things. You can't control other people no matter how much you want to. You can't control the other school's decisions, the way teachers or anything like that, no matter how much you want to. And by focusing on what you can't control, that can really lead to a lot of big emotions, a lot of the anger and the frustration. But it's more helpful to focus on what you can control in the situation. What's also helpful is to make a list of the resources that you have available to you at the time. So it's recognizing what I can control, what I do have control over, and what resources do I have right now to be able to help me. And by having a list of those resources that you can access, that can be a lot more helpful than having to try to come up with those resources on the spot. Just having a list can be really helpful. Something else that's helpful to keep in mind and consider is a mindset. Something that happens in stressful situations, times of change, transition, is our mindset can develop into unhelpful thinking patterns, just different ways of thinking that's just not helpful. So I'm going to go over a couple of the most common ones that you might notice in yourself or your kids. So there's the all or nothing thinking. This is when we think it has to be this way or that way, and there's no other option. When we do this, we cut ourselves off from alternative thoughts. So one way to do this is to catch yourself doing it. One of those ways is to notice when you're using the words always and never. And it's working on challenging it, questioning it. Has it always really been this way? Has there ever been a time where it hasn't been like this? So being able to catch it and question it. You can also look at doing that problem solving. So what can be helpful in the problem solving is listing all of the solutions to the problem, no matter how ridiculous they sound. Even ones that really aren't possible and sound totally ridiculous, but they're creative. Listing all the possible solutions that are there. And what that does is that opens the door to new and more balanced thinking. Another one you might hear from your kids is overgeneralizing. This is when you take an experience from one situation and you generalize it to everything else. So maybe you struggled on that one math test and so now you're terrible at math, period. Or you have a negative experience with a friend and all of a sudden I'm a horrible friend across the board. And it really isn't helpful to think that way and it gets us stuck. So ways to challenge this is to look for reality. Am I really a horrible friend? Is there evidence to prove this across the board? Would a friend that I have really say that about me? Would they call me a horrible friend? It's looking for reality checking. Another one that you might notice is mind reading. This is assuming we know what other people are thinking or assuming that other people have certain information. The whole, I know she thinks this, or she knows that I don't like this. Those types of statements. So, a way to be able to manage this sort of situation is, again, challenging it, catching and challenging. How do I know this is true? How do I know that they know this information? Where is the evidence to show it? So looking at these mindsets, trying to catch yourself with them and work on challenging them can help us change the way that we view different situations and make it easier when we're trying to adapt to change. Because when we're adapting to change, a lot of times we can get stuck. And what we want to do is we kind of want to get unstuck from the way that we're thinking and allow new ways of thinking to emerge that help us with that transition. Resources that might be helpful. One of the resources is Change to Chill. Change to Chill is a free online resource that's basically a bunch of coping skills and it teaches you how to use them. It's geared towards teens, but it's actually really good for and easily modifiable for younger kids. And I know plenty of adults who use those skills as well. Another resource is called Khan Academy. Khan Academy is an online resource that helps teach different subjects, different ways. So if your kid has a teacher who's teaching it one specific way and they're just not getting it, Khan Academy can maybe give you a different way of teaching the same material that maybe your kid is able to understand better. Looking for school resources for tutoring if it's needed. A lot of National Honor Society high school students and districts are offering different tutoring. So you can see if maybe your district is doing something that's similar to this. And again, looking for your family readiness specialist, what resources they have available to you. They have a lot of different resources, different options, and getting further support through Military OneSource. So if you'd like more information on how we can support you and your family, please check us out at ysb.net. And I hope some of these practical things that I've shared with you today will help you in this transition of different school settings.